Hi, welcome to Podium. This week we have the recording from a webinar that I did last week with integrated health practitioner Scott Kelly and musician and author Nick Bettini. The title of the webinar was Why Waiting for Something to Return to Normal is a Bad Idea, the ultimate guide to navigate uncertainty and change. I hope you enjoy the conversation.
Okay, so really warm welcome. What inspired this conversation was I was just reflecting on the situation we are in around the world, and I could see and hear from lots of people that being in this state of uncertainty and change is causing a lot of people, if you like, a lot of anxiety. And I thought to myself, wouldn't it be really nice to get a couple of people onto a call and just simply have a chat? So that's what this conversation is. We're just going to be talking about what it is we've come to discover about the way in which the mind is working and the way that produces our experiences as human beings, and see if you can hear anything for yourselves. Because here we have my special guest, Scott Kelly, and my other special guest, Nick Bettini. So welcome, you guys, and thank you so much for being on the call with me. And I'll introduce them separately in a moment. But we're all three in very different areas of professional lives and obviously unique experiences, but we all have found something which is the same, which has completely transformed our lives and the lives of our clients, and that's what we want to share with you. So with no further ado, I'm going to introduce my first guest. Is Scott Kelly, and you can get hold of Scott on scottkellycoaching.com, just in case I forget. All right, so Scott has spent over 23 years as a coach, mentor, and integrative health practitioner, assisting individuals in reconnecting to their innate health and well-being, improving performance, and living with clarity. State of Mind Coaching is the foundation to his integrative health and well-being programs, and has worked with professional athletes, Olympians, couples, families, teams, corporations, and individuals who want to live, work, perform, and play from their inner vitality. Scott is a dynamic and powerful presenter and teacher. He designs and delivers workshops and talks that leave people with a new and insightful understanding about their own health, well-being, and potential. So welcome, Scott.
Thank you, Denise. Super happy to be here. Thank you all for joining us. I'm excited to play for the next hour with you all.
Thank you. And my second guest is Nick Bettini, and you can get hold of Nick on nickbettini.com. That's BOTTINI.com, Nick Bettini. And he is an author of the Amazon #1 bestseller, Just Play, The Simple Truth Behind Musical Excellence, Rethink Press 2018, not quite sure what that is, which was endorsed by Grammy winners, music industry professionals, and mental health experts. Nick is a transformational coach and for over 10 years has worked with musicians at all levels of the industry. He has mentored and coached international rock stars, competition winners, child prodigies, entrepreneurs, conservatoire students, sports people, and aspiring professional musicians. As a public speaker and workshop leader, Nick has created talks and programs for the Musicians Union, Sirius Manchester Metropolitan University, Trinity Laban Conservatoire of Music and Dance, the Royal College of Music, Waterbury College of Music, Platform One College of Music, as well as various international conferences. He is also active as a freelance saxophonist. So welcome, Nick. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm loving the fact that there are some familiar faces and some faces I've yet to learn, so I'm very excited to
Beautiful. Well, that's lovely. So just another little bit of housekeeping. I am assuming you are au fait with Zoom, but if you're not, then you can go to whatever view you like. So you can go to speaker view at the top by pressing the 9 little kind of dice pieces. You can go to gallery view, or you can go to speaker view, and you can just to have whatever view you like of this session. Okay, so let's just take a moment just to get into our conversation. And I'm just going to hand it over to our guest speakers, because what I would love us to do is to get into a conversation about how this understanding of the mind, which was completely invisible to us at one point in our life, completely changed our lives. All right. So what I'd like to do, and what we're going to do, is we're going to ask the same question of all three of us, and that means that you can hear it from each of our perspectives. And one thing that I learned before by one of my mentors is kind of don't listen to our words, kind of just let whatever we talk about wash over you and get a deeper sense of what it is that we're talking about. Because this understanding, known as the three principles behind the human experience, as uncovered by the late Sydney Banks, and you can find more information about that on www.3pgc.org. It's not an intellectual understanding, so you get a sense of it, and it is really cool. So what I'm going to do is just ask Scott if you would like to go first with us. And really, my first question is around, can you give us an example of a sort of a defining moment, that moment when you kind of realized something that really kind of changed your life? And can you give us an example of that?
Yeah, what comes to mind when I came across this understanding, it was during a time period that I was really struggling internally, and I was really conflicted because of what I had been taught and what I had been teaching at the time really revolved around controlling the mind, controlling emotions, controlling our experience, managing the mind, managing our thinking, and all of these things that kind of went with it. And so I found myself unbelievably overemployed in my own mind. And in a really interesting way, started to find that I was slowly kind of spiraling in my own experience. And what I mean by that is just I wasn't enjoying life at all. And in some degree pretending I was enjoying life because of what my job was. And this understanding, when it really truly impacted me beyond my intellect, the profound shift that it had was that my relationship with my thinking completely changed. And what I saw was that I had given so much respect to the ideas that I had about myself and about life and about people, and that I had given so much respect to my experience, that I had been ignoring the fact that there was a deeper understanding within that could free me up. And when my relationship with my thinking changed, everything in my life changed, to the point where everything in my work changed, everything in my health changed, everything in my relationships changed, simply by seeing the nature of how our thinking and how our mind works. But most importantly, the fact that there was a deeper wisdom within that could kind of clear the path for me and do the work that I thought I was supposed to be doing, which was create happiness and well-being and joy and all that other stuff. I realized that was far beyond my pay grade.
That's beautiful. That's really beautiful, Scott. And I love that there's a point where what I heard in that is, and what's really powerful for me is there's a point where we find that we don't need to take our thinking and our feeling state so seriously, that it doesn't mean what we think it means. And I didn't have any eyes for that at all until I was in a a really emotional state, if you like, when I left my role as national coach for Scotland prematurely. And I was reading one of Michael Neill's books and Jamie Smart's books, and it said something about we're only ever feeling our thinking, and that we are not that. And there's this deeper essence, there's this deeper creative potential that if we look at it, it's providing us that resilience in life, that the next thought about knowing what to do. And I didn't have any eyes for that. I thought the world was creating the way I felt, and that if that's the case, then I could blame it. And when I saw, oh no, hang on a minute, there are times where I felt fine about leaving my role, and there are other times I felt completely distraught about leaving my role. So if that's the case, then surely that's coming from me. That's not coming from the world, the circumstance, the situation. That maybe this experience I was having is on offer. It's up for grabs, and it's not something that is as solid as I thought it was. And when I started to see that really deeply, I then was no longer a victim of the circumstances. I could see, hang on a minute, yeah, just like clouds in the sky, thoughts come and go. That's weird. And when I started to look, the truth of that, it was just a game changer. It really was. So
Yeah.
Nick, sorry. So Nick, could I ask you to kind of give us an intro with that same question of kind of what it is that you realized, and how did that impact your life initially?
So I think when I first came across this understanding, it sounded quite similar to a few other things that I'd heard before, and I was trying to make sense of it in terms of what I already knew. And there was a point, there's no sort of rhyme or reason to sort of when it arrived, but there was a conversation that I had with somebody, and I was talking about, some problems that I was having, and I'm not even sure of exactly what he said to me, but I was sort of overcome by this feeling that I'd been living in a world of belief after belief after belief, and so much of that world of beliefs had been invisible to me, that the fact that I'd been creating that world of beliefs, not only about the stuff that seems to be out there, but about the one that I seemed to be thinking was having the experience, who I thought I was. And whatever he said to me, it was like, I could first of all sort of see the fact that my idea, this phony idea about who I thought I was just an idea. And then it's like, and then I fell out of that idea into what truly is. And it sort of hit, it was more of a feeling. It wasn't sort of like an intellectual, sort of, epiphany or anything, but it was just this sort of feeling of, I'm home. I'm, there's, the search is over. There's nowhere else to go. I know who I am. And I'm not saying that has always been visible to me. I don't always, I'm not going to pretend that I always see the world in that kind of experience, but if I was to sort of pinpoint a particular moment where it wasn't just a theory anymore, I could see it as what's really going on, then that was it. And then so it wasn't so much a case of trying to prove anything in the same way. I spent so long as a musician, the music industry is, I mean, it's not just the music industry, but so much of it is based on who's better, where you fit, who knows more, who can do more, who can be more. And once I saw all that stuff as being a sort of that made up hierarchy disappearing, and then being being on a level playing field with everybody else and everything else. I don't know if I can swear, but it just felt like I was just cutting the bullshit. It was like bullshit was over, you know, and it was just like reality hit. And there was no really going back after that. It was, it felt like I was shocked that more people couldn't see what was right under. It'd been invisible to me, like you said. It had been invisible to me until it became visible to me that was right under my nose. And then I knew, you know, it's like you are already who you truly are, but you don't necessarily remember that yet, you know, until you see it. Words don't work for this stuff when you sort of look at it really, really carefully. But the feeling behind it. Yeah, I suppose that's the best way I can put it into words right now, is that I just felt like I was at home. I knew who I was.
That's beautiful.
Again.
That's lovely, Nick. And I've heard many times that expression of coming home, or you know, you found your peace of mind, or you found the clarity, you've found the wisdom, if you like, of the ages, that which has been, people have been seeking for a long time, and you know, over the years. And it's fascinating, isn't it, that we're born into this world, 2 cells create a human being. I mean, that intelligence is incredible. We grow, we learn, we love, we're full of love and compassion. And somewhere along the line, we learn inadvertently that we're not enough, that somehow there's something else we need to do in the world rather than just be, and with our natural capacities to grow and to develop, that somehow we have to prove ourselves. And one of the first things I saw was that, wow, human beings spend their time trying to be right, trying to prove themselves, seeking approval of others, you know, needing to achieve in order to feel okay. And that, for me, is one of the biggest misunderstandings of our, and we can, in this work, we call it our conditioning. And that is just, again, what Nick said, stories that we just inadvertently get caught up in because we can. And what we're pointing to is to basically flesh that out, identify how that's working, such that we can fall back into, some people call it, you know, original grace, coming home. And from that space, or your guiding light, or the wisdom and resilience within, from that space, it's, life just seems to be, for me anyway, a lot lighter. Yeah. So yeah, let's move on to our next question then, Scott. We had a conversation, Scott, Nick and Nick and I, about the title of this session, and we couldn't actually decide. So but I have been really indecisive. So I came up with, you know, what I saw people waiting. So I just want to ask Scott, you know, so why is waiting for something to return to normal in our minds a bad idea? Scott?
Yeah, you know, it's a funny thing when we wait for things to return to normal, because the fact of normal is just what we've created in our mind. It's a place of it's kind of an imaginary place of safety and security that we've created in our mind. And if we kind of create this construct in our mind, and then wait for the world outside to look like what we've created in our mind, we're going to be waiting a long time. And most importantly, we ignore the fact that we have the most ingenious level of of presence and wisdom and intelligence and guidance that understands how to navigate whatever circumstances we're in, no matter what they are, no matter what we're up to. There's a way in which we can show up to those experiences and those circumstances with clarity and fluidity. If we don't know that, then we get overwhelmed and intimidated by the world outside, and we hope and we wish it would return to something that we can be familiar with. And so sometimes I feel like, when things are changing, like right now in the world, things are changing so dramatically and they're shifting, and people are kind of, it's like we go through life and we're just kind of doing this in our normal daily lives, and everything looks like it's familiar, looks like it's okay. And then all of a sudden we get thrown into the tumbler, and we get thrown off our familiarity. We get thrown off of what is normal, what is common, what is familiar. And in that space, we so desperately try and grasp onto anything that looks familiar so that we can feel safe and secure, not realizing that safety and security were never at risk in the first place. Emotional safety and security are never at risk. And so when we can see that waiting for normal is really kind of it eliminates the capacity for us to see and create in the current experience. And what is so true, and I think if we all reflect on our own lives, whenever we are thrown into the tumbler, because that is a normal piece of life, right? No matter if it's in our personal lives or wherever it is, whenever we're thrown into the tumbler, we always come out with a higher level of understanding. We kind of go through, we get thrown in the tumbler, and then ultimately we get spit out, and we come through with a level of understanding that allows us to not be fearful of the tumbler. But we forget that the tumbler was actually just a way that creates disorganization so that we can see something new. And what I so love and have grown to appreciate about life is that the tumbler in this way is what shows us the expansion of understanding. Because without the experiences of being tumbled, we can't know that expansion of understanding is even available. It just becomes an intellectual exercise. But once we're thrown into it through experience, we come through it and we say, oh my gosh, I can't believe I was so afraid of that. And we come through it with a different level of understanding. So in a way, it's like life is just fertilizing us to be open and creative and showing us how resilient we truly are. And ultimately, that we don't have to be afraid of life, that life has got our back if we're open to letting it lead rather than us having to kind of control the experience that we're having. So that's why I think that waiting for things to come back to normal, one, I don't think that's really possible. And I think it just leaves our true human capacity on the table.
That's beautiful, Scott. Thank you. Really beautiful. So Nick, let's hear from you on that same question. What does that mean to you? And what I love about when we ask each other things and when we listen to each other, we never know what is inside another person's head. It doesn't matter what words they use, because all we are doing as human beings is making sense of that vibration and using the power of the mind, all of these beautiful gifts we've got inside of us, and the imagination to be able to make sense of that and what that means for us. So that's why it's really cool to ask the same question, and then 10 minutes later you can ask the same question again and something else will be there.
Mm-hmm.
So Nick, why in your mind is it a bad idea to live from a space of waiting for something to change, or waiting for something to get back to what it was before?
I love the way you've asked that question, actually, because living from the space of, I think, is the thing that was sort of on my mind just now, because I can imagine. I'm not going to ask people on the call right now, but I can imagine that, for those sort of contrarians among you, that you might sort of look at this thing about waiting until things are back to normal and think, actually, are there circumstances when should I wait and sort of invest in a particular aspect of my business later on, or should I go and partake in a particular activity later on when things are back to normal? There's a certain level, at the level of beliefs and at the level of sort of familiar patterns, as which I could definitely understand that someone could say, I do want to sort of hold fire. But the crucial thing, about what the way that you said it there was that if you, and Scott said the same thing beautifully, actually, that if you think that there is a kind of status quo in how the details of your experience or the details of your world should be, whether that's in the stuff or the activities or the way people are, or even like the feeling that you're having in any particular moment. If you feel that there's a sort of destination feeling or destination circumstance that gives you permission to be yourself, or to show up, or to partake in life, or to find joy, or to be with what's happening, then that's fundamentally a misunderstanding about like how the system is working, not so much about like the details of the experience, of the form it's taking. We're talking about something that's before the form. It's sort of where the form is arising or where the form is coming from. So, and that's a moment to moment to moment thing by its nature. So, you might talk about sort of being in the moment, or not being in the moment, or what have you, or being present or not being present. But what we're saying, I guess, is that it's not really true that you can ever be anywhere other than in the present moment. You just think you're somewhere else, and when we're sort of hanging fire or waiting before we try something new in our life in this new situation, or if we're sort of putting off doing something that could be useful to us, then we're acting from a misunderstanding. We're acting from a belief system rather than stopping for a moment and looking around, or feeling into it, and getting curious about what's actually real now for you. What's real for you now? Like where are the opportunities, or where's the beauty, or where is the joy? Where is it beautiful already? And when I've started to sort of look for the places where I could be okay with certain aspects of my life, there's nothing that I couldn't be okay with. I'm not saying that there aren't things I want to do in the world and sort of take action and stuff, but in terms of my emotional relationship with what is, I think that's what this boils down to for me. It's like being okay with what is, and then you can act and do what makes sense, which in a way that's calibrated to the now rather than calibrated to some belief system of how the world should be. But if you look closely, it's never how it should be, it's how it is. So getting clear on the difference, I guess, between belief and what gives rise to belief, thought, the capacity to think, the capacity to have this experience. You could call it a human experience, I suppose, but this experience we're having of life, we're more closely calibrated. It's a bit like trying to be a tightrope walker. If you look on like something like YouTube or something, there's plenty of how-to videos saying, try this pole will help you to balance, or you should try moving to the left, and moving to the left is always a good idea, or moving to the right is always a good idea. But the only tightrope walker that can actually do the job is the one that is feeling with their feet and responding and using whatever technique or whatever means they need to be able to calibrate to the moment and adjust. And that's what we're talking about, as and essentially, this, COVID or whatever aside, that's not changed. That's not changed one bit. It's just given us an opportunity to notice that that's going on now. So that's why I would say it's a misunderstanding to think that it's ever possible to get back to normal, because that normal, like Scott said, is a thought.
Beautiful. And for me, I guess I'll just share a little story which kind of places both what Scott and Nick have beautifully highlighted. In September last year, my mum got very sick, and for 2 months we were in and out of the hospital. And mum was beautifully going around about her life. She was 80, she was driving, she was just full of life, and she just got suddenly sick, actually, with a punctured bowel. And for 8 weeks we were in the hospital. We were helping her, basically trying to get her to get better. And I noticed that it was so tiring, and I was so exhausted, and I was so drained. I just wanted it to, yes, get back to normal. I wanted the situation to change. I wanted to not feel like this. The way I felt was really anxious. And there was this whole thing about, this world is not happening the way I want it to happen. So there was all of this happening inside of me. And then I would sit with mum, and we would just really just be together. And it was just so beautiful. And we were really present with each other. And because she started to really get an understanding of the way in which life is working for us, we got an idea that we're not our bodies. And we had the most beautiful moments together during that whole time. And finally, on the 3rd of November, she did pass away. And I reflected on that, and have been since. And don't get me wrong, I have my moments where I completely lose my stuff. But why I tell you that story is because there was the situation, and a mum was in effect dying unexpectedly, and here I am having this incredible roller coaster of experiences, and I could see, when I kind of got behind my lens of experience, I could see, oh, Denise, your experience is not created by mum, the situation, mum being really poorly. Yours, even that is being created from inside. And I could see it so clearly, because there were moments when we were really beautifully present, and I wouldn't have wanted that at all to be anything else. And then there was other times where I would get a lot more thinking, and I'd be really panicked. And it really helped me with the loss and the grief of my mum passing, because it looks like there are some things that no, that can't be inside out. That's got to be caused from out there. But even death, it isn't true. Even that, there is this beautiful design which protects us and keeps us healthy and keeps us safe. And it doesn't mean I don't go through periods of grief. I do. But they're much shorter, and they're much lighter than I'm sure I would ever experienced if I didn't have this understanding. But what I love about this is that I helped my mum to pass in a way with such grace and such ease. And we just laughed and smiled and sung together 2 days before she passed. And it was a really beautiful example of this incredible intelligence that's taking care of us. And it wasn't the way I wanted it, but that's not up to me. That's not in my domain. And when I saw that as this conditioning, this thinking, this, Nick, you beautifully alluded to it there as well, Scott, you did, that whatever it is that we create as our belief systems of what should happen and ought to happen and that we want to happen, you know what, that's still thought, and it's transient, and it's not a permanent gig. It's the way in which it works to create experience. It's not who we are, and it's not the situation. And that really helped me. Really did. So I just wanted to share that story with you briefly. And I'm going to carry on and just sit for a moment. Scott, is there a question that's coming up or something that's coming up for you now in this moment that you would like to share?
Yeah, I think what as we've kind of all pointed to, I think there's a misunderstanding in the human experience about how much work we have to do. There's a lot of talk around dismantling beliefs. There's a lot of talk around dismantling our ideas about ourselves, and I think it's a misunderstanding, because we can have all of that, and mucking around with it is really it's not a very productive place to play, because literally, I mean, if we've got this construct and we've got all these ideas that we've innocently taken on and we've innocently engaged with over time, just outside of them, just literally over the gate, is new thought. Just outside the gate is new understanding. And that's true moment to moment. And in our own human experience, we're kind of like, we're inside the gate and we fall outside the gate. We're inside the gate and we fall outside the gate. And we're constantly doing this. But if we could know that what's always true is that literally just one thought outside of our own ideas is a new realm of possibility. So what that means for all of us is that all of the things that are going on here can go on there, and they don't have to change for us in order for us to be okay. Mm. And it's not so much about dismantling and deconstructing and eliminating and controlling those things as much as it is having an orientation to the realm just outside the gate. And for me, that's what presence is. Presence is the knowing the difference. And presence is knowing the fact that whatever I think I'm tied to, just outside of that, is truth.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful, Scott. Yeah, Nick, in terms of leading on from that, I think it's a beautiful place for us to lead on to performance. And one of the questions that comes up in this understanding is, yeah, but Denise, if I does this mean that I can just sit back and just take it steady, and I don't have to put in any hard work, and I don't have to engage, and I don't have to get so involved if it's all just going to come to me, does it mean I can be a bit laissez-faire? And so I know that in performance we get a feel for this automatic zone optimal functioning state, and it doesn't mean that, and that's not just for performers and high performers. That's the same for everyone when they just seem to be in the flow of life, right? And they're thriving instead of striving. I remember Michael Neal saying that to me one time, and it just stuck. And I go, oh, I see the difference. I feel the difference. So can you talk to, especially as a musician, can you talk to this in terms of high performance or performing?
I think it's worth sort of starting with, like, everything we're talking about on this call, and everything that any, I guess, performer, whether they're a sports person or a business person or a musician, when we're talking about learning a skill set, then we have to use a set of metaphors. And because we apparently have these bodies and have agency to be able to do things like pick up glasses of water and that sort of thing, that we tend to use like physical doing metaphors, mechanical metaphors. So when people are talking about getting in the zone, or sort of reprogramming your mind, or changing your state, it's coming from a place of metaphor. And because certainly as musicians, the actual physical doing, and as a sports person the same, the physical doing is an art form, and it's a particular kind of art form. But it's important to know that to look in the opposite direction to how we're normally conditioned to look. So rather than looking towards the to there purely being this outside world, the first step for many people is to realize that there is this apparent inside world. Apparent because there's not really that division, but as a starting point to look within to what you begin by calling maybe the psychological side, but it's really, like Sid was pointing to, that there's no line between anything. There's no line between psychological and spiritual, or psychological or spiritual or physical. It's all one sort of canvas. And once we see that there's something in that, and we dig a little deeper, we realize that there's not really anything that we can truly sort of do to control our mindset, or try and engineer a certain state of mind. It can appear to us that we can, but we don't really have that kind of control that we think we do. And so it's not that we need to sort of engineer a peak state, or we need to engineer sort of creative freedom. It's we just need to stop. We just need to understand that we're okay when we don't feel confident as a performer, or we're okay when we're complete and whole when we feel insecure, or when we feel like we haven't achieved enough in our life, or we're not a good enough, we don't deserve to be on this platform. And that thought's crossed my mind, in the course of this call. It's like, who am I to be talking about this thing? What qualifies me? And then that's a thought. It's something that comes and goes, and it's almost like, the way I see it is, even talking about in a certain way, I guess, even talking about peak performance or peak mindset is only half of the story. because it's all peak. This is it's going to sound weird, but this is as good as it gets. This is perfection. This is peak. This is beauty. But it's just that there's more of that beauty to be seen. There's more of that freedom to be experienced. And so we naturally assume that there's something wrong. We haven't quite got it. We haven't quite got there. And it's more about sort of not taking away the unnecessary, but just relaxing into that. So doing is for the outside stuff, but doing's not an internal thing. It's a metaphor. You need to appreciate that it's a metaphor. I think that for me seems to be something that does a huge amount for what you might call a high performer, because they've been told, and I certainly was, that you've got to have the mindset of a winner. There's something special. You've got to be different. And once I was pointed in the opposite direction about how to allow myself to be ordinary, the perfection of the ordinary, and the perfection of those sort of darker thoughts and feelings as well, and sort of welcoming those in, what you might call like shadow work, or however you want to think about it in sort of psychological terms. But you're okay with even your most horrible thoughts and feelings, the ones you can't even speak, the ones that you would not be on camera talking about. You're okay even in the face of those. They're nothing to do with who you are. They're just what's arising. And when we know that, we can just do what we're there to do and not worry about how we're coming across. And then people will look at that person and say they're a high performer just because they're not thinking about stuff they don't unnecessarily need to think about. It's just unnecessary stuff just sort of falls away by itself.
Beautiful. I love that. I love that distinction and the normalizing and the neutralizing of performance. And that's kind of why I asked the question. So there's nothing more perfect than us just being.
And that's not to say that you don't practice your scales, by the way, or that you don't learn the structure of your talk if you're going to deliver a particular talk that needs a structure. Not every talk needs a structure, but do you see what I mean? It's kind of paradoxical. You're not in control, but you're not in control. It's this interplay of formless and form, and it's sort of knowing how they both relate. And what that often involves is most of the time sort of waking us up to the formless side of the equation.
Beautiful. So I'm conscious of the time, and I just wanted to open it up. We have about 8 minutes left, and often questions that are burning coming up for people just lead us into another area, a beautiful part of another area of conversation. So I just wanted to open it out to the audience and to the participants on here. If there is a pressing question that you would like to ask either of us, I would say raise your hand, but I can't actually see the raise the hand button. So what I'm going to do is just say to yourself, could you just unmute yourself and just ask the question? But bear in mind, it is recorded, and you don't have to be scared. That's thinking, yeah. Joking. But if you don't want to have your video on, then you can just turn it off. Is there a question, a burning question? We'll leave it open for a couple of minutes, a couple of seconds.
I promise we don't bite. There's no stupid questions, too.
No. or how it's landing even. Beautiful. Cassandra, lovely.
I just wanted to ask a question based off that last piece that Nick was talking about, and how much action, because I really understand that, being present and open to what naturally comes in the moment is key. But I'd really like to just hear any of you actually talk about the action part, And I kind of got a glimpse of it when you were saying that, you know, it's paradoxical and you're going in and out of that. But just speaking to the action side of it, that would be really helpful.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll just have a quick stab at it and then I'll pass it over to Scott. I really did feel once I got a glimpse of this understanding that I didn't need to be on it. All right, and that I didn't. And even more now, even this last few months, just trusting that feeling of flow and wisdom and resilience just showing up in me. And that might mean that I find myself some days really churning out so much work and lots of action, really you know, making lots of calls and creating lots of projects that I wouldn't have done and putting a lot of effort into it. But effort in terms of effortlessness, when I say effort, I don't mean effort actually, I just mean energy. I mean energy into it. And at the end of the day, I'm just so surprised at what's been achieved. So for me, it doesn't mean I can sit back and wait for something to come up, because, you know, I live in a physical, practical world, and I realize that getting involved in taking action might be required for a particular time and circumstance. But that's very different from where I was before. Before, I was really grinding it out. I was really having to persevere, and the determination felt hard for me as a national coach and as an athlete. And it felt as if I was needing to prove myself, the underlying feel. It felt that I needed to do double time in terms of action. And it doesn't feel like that anymore. But it doesn't mean I'm sitting on the couch either. And then there are times where I do sit on the couch and it's beautiful. Yeah. So it's a case of me listening to what's occurring, what's presenting itself, and getting tuning into the feeling. And if it feels peaceful and clear-minded and you know, compassionate, it kind of feels right. But if it feels it's got a bit of angst and it's got a bit of stress and it, you know, if sort of ego mind's in there, there's a feeling to that, and that's the feeling I've got a bit more wise to. Yeah. Scott, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, what really kind of shows up for me is that there's a way in which this understanding is the X factor behind everything. It's the X factor behind any performance. It's the X factor behind any skill. And I think sometimes we have a misunderstanding about how this works. So I oftentimes say, learn and practice your skills and then let go. You know, learn and practice your skills and then let go. Learn and practice whatever you're up to. You know, I oftentimes say, if I'm working with a company, you know, I don't know anything about accounting, but I know that your accounting will be better with this understanding, because their skill set gets enhanced by the fluidity of wisdom that's behind it. And so we can go out and we can do what we do and practice what we practice. And then when we let go and let that energy kind of lead us, that I think is the experience of the zone. You know, when you know, zone, when athletes when they fall into the zone, they're not sitting on the couch. They're the most engaged, but at a level of engagement that is fluid. And it's only because they're letting their skills be driven by an internal wisdom rather than through an intellectual space.
That's lovely. That's beautiful. So we've come to the top of the hour. So I just want to give Nick and Scott opportunity to have some parting words. We are thinking about doing a couple of these. There is part of a series with lots of different speakers. So some parting words, please, Nick.
Oh, good grief! No pressure. I don't know that there's any sort of succinct sort of gem of wisdom that I can offer that hasn't been said already. But the phrase that's springing to mind is one that I mentioned in the book, which is beginner's mind. Is like be prepared to take a fresh look, or to take a fresh feel, or to listen with fresh ears to this moment, and navigate from there, rather than your nice ideas, or your version, your idea of what normal should be or good should be. I think come back to the now. That's what I'd say.
Beautiful. Scott?
Yeah, like Nick, I don't know if there's much to be said other than, I think one thing that if we all did just a little bit more is we just became a little bit more suspicious of our own constructs. Just a little bit of suspicion can lead us outside the gate into a new world of possibility.
Beautiful. And I guess for me, I just feel that, now is a really cool time to be kind to ourselves and to just sit back and relax into the amazing peace and love and compassion that we are as human beings, and to just have eyes for what it is that we inadvertently tell ourselves in order to be okay. It's a story and it's up for grabs. You don't have to go with that.
Well, wasn't that a lovely conversation? I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to get hold of myself, I'm on denise.holland@class-performance.com. And if you'd like to get hold of Scott Kelly, Scott is on scottkellycoaching.com. And Nick Bottini is available on Nick Bottini, that's Nick Bottini, BOTTINI.com. And that just leaves me to say thank you so much for listening, and I'll speak to you and share with you again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.